Welcome everyone to New America, and to those in the room and those online, thanks so much for joining us today for this conversation with Professor Daniel Solove on privacy, technology, and protecting democracy. Those words will strike you as particularly timely, and they are, and we hope it will be. We know it'll be a rich and engaging conversation. A little bit about New America and OTI, and then a bit about Professor Solove. New America is a nonpartisan, nonprofit think and action tank dedicated to renewing the promise of America. And I'm Prem Trivedi, the policy director of the Open Technology Institute here. And OTI is part of the technology and democracy programs at New America, and our mission is to research and advocate for policy and technical solutions that drive equitable access to digital technology and its benefits. Now, realizing those benefits means governing tech in ways that serve and reflect democratic values. And so privacy in both the governmental context and the commercial context has long been a core focus of OTI's work. So we're thrilled to have Professor Solove here, one of the preeminent privacy law scholars, talking with us about these topics today. So Dan Solove is the Eugene L. and Barbara A. Bernard Professor of Intellectual Property and Technology Law at the George Washington University Law School. He is, as I said, one of the world's leading experts on privacy law. He co-directs the GW Center for Law and Technology, is the director as well of the Privacy and Technology Program, and he's also the founder of Teach Privacy, a privacy and cybersecurity training company. Not content with that, he's a prolific author as well of over 10 books and I think over 100 articles, scholarly articles on privacy. And we're here today for some timely discussion through the lens of his recent book on privacy and technology. A couple of display copies out front. I think folks online will have a link drop for them if they'd like to explore the book as well. And we're also going to be chatting a bit about his forthcoming law review article, which is available for reading now, called Privacy in Authoritarian Times. And for folks who are online in particular, the event description has links to both of these as well. So Dan, thanks so much for taking the time and joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So let's just dive in. I mean, your book on privacy and technology, which, by the way, we were chatting about this earlier, and I think this was your ambition, to write something truly concise. It's about 100 pages. That is as rare as it sounds, but it's a rich 100 pages. So highly recommend it, and we'll unpack that. We'll unpack Privacy in Authoritarian Times a bit, both of which I think, as the title suggests, are incredibly well timed. And so what I want to ask you to start by doing is characterize the moment now to which they are responding. And I'll throw a couple of things out and then turn it over to you. So that current moment with respect to US government posture on privacy, many folks in the room and online have followed DOJ's data grabs, the plans to feed that data into AI systems for who knows which uses, the expansion of DHS surveillance to cover more rigorously things like social media. But if you take the longer view as well, and not just sort of the last 6 or 7 months, I think many folks who have followed Professor Solove's work have been part of longstanding efforts to pass comprehensive federal privacy law, still knocking on that door. Lots of folks in the room and online have worked on efforts to modernize federal statutes like ECPA and the Privacy Act for a very long time. So there are these long struggles, and then there are the challenges that we see taking shape in very acute ways over the last several months. And so as you reflect on the first half year or so of this administration and this new Congress, how would you characterize where things stand now, particularly with respect to the federal government and its role on privacy?
Well, I would definitely say we're in a pretty bad spot right now. The activities of DOJ and the data gathering have been really unprecedented. They've illustrated some of the long-standing privacy problems that have existed for quite some time. And I felt a little bit like, over the past 25 years, like Chicken Little claiming the sky's falling, this is going to get worse, this is going to get worse, we really need to do something. And we saw legislatures from around the world pass privacy laws, which I think are well-meaning. Some of them aren't terrible. Unfortunately, most aren't that good. They've taken an approach that I think is not the right direction. But now we're really seeing the problems come to the fore. Unprecedented gathering of data to be used in who knows which way, an authoritarian government that is using information to track down people and essentially put them in camps and disappear them. We are seeing all of the problems that have been warned about from this for a very long time. And then couple that with the developments in AI recently. This has been a long time coming, but now it has gone to a kind of a new level. And we have a lot of these unaddressed problems that have existed in privacy law for quite some time, all kind of coming to the fore now. And we see the problems really desperately have needed an intervention, a new direction. And now I think we're seeing that the failure to move in those directions, the failure to address these problems has led to where we are now. And I do not think the law is equipped to handle the moment that we're in.
It's an excellent overview of, I think, many of the things we want to explore in this conversation. And before we start to get to some of your ideas and your prescriptions on how the law ought to evolve, I want to, we started by talking a little bit about what the government's role is, your sense of the moment, in safeguarding, or more to the point, imperiling privacy. But as you point out in the book, also in the law review article, that conversation about government attitudes to privacy and government surveillance is inextricably tied up with and dependent on, in large part, corporate data collection and surveillance. And so in your article, Privacy in Authoritarian Times, you describe government surveillance and the ecosystem of corporate surveillance that Shoshana Zuboff has called surveillance capitalism as two sides of the same coin. So for the folks who may not be steeped in privacy work, can you unpack a little bit what that two-sided dynamic is and why it's so important to figure out what to do in response to these moments?
Yeah, so for a long time, there were a number of folks who focused very heavily, almost exclusively on government surveillance. And so they were very much opposed to government surveillance. I'm thinking of libertarian positions. So they wanted light regulation of what companies can do, but strong protections against the government. That government surveillance stifles individuals, it is dangerous, and we need to rein it in. The problem with this view is that it's incomplete, that I don't think there's any meaningful way that we really can address the problems of government surveillance, to put it under adequate control without addressing surveillance capitalism. We have to address surveillance capitalism because it's intricately interwoven with government surveillance. The technologies that the government uses to engage in surveillance are made by the private sector. And these technologies are designed by the private sector and sold to the government, and they're built in ways that minimize accountability, maximize some of the worst types of surveillance that the government can do. We have the government increasingly using the private sector to collect and analyze personal information. And so the companies are creating tools and analytics software to help the government analyze data. They are collecting the data for the government. And the law has been incredibly weak at addressing the intersection of the government and the private sector. And so for a very long time, a big problem in Fourth Amendment law is that the Fourth Amendment has what's called the third-party doctrine. And this is a view that there is no reasonable expectation of privacy in data maintained by third parties. And the result is that the government can gather information from any third party, from Amazon or from any company that gathers it, from a data broker, and it can gather this information without triggering the Fourth Amendment, without any Fourth Amendment protection. And that means that the government doesn't need to search your home if it wants to find out what you're reading and writing. It can just get this information from various third parties because in today's age, all of our information is maintained by third parties. Most of the books I buy are online. Most of the things I buy are with a credit card. All of this data now can be used to find out a lot about me. And so instead of wanting to figure out what I'm up to by, well, you'd have to, in the past, search my home and search my papers. Well, now you can just get this data from third parties. And with sophisticated AI algorithms, you can take this data and you can analyze it and then start figuring out a lot of other things about me, things about my health, things about my political beliefs, things about religion, and all sorts of other things can be found out by putting this data together and analyzing it, all of which falls outside of any Fourth Amendment protection at all. So it gives the government tremendous power. And industries have arisen, the data broker industry and others, that are making a tremendous profit in doing this activity for the government and then essentially collecting it for them and selling it to them. And this is the world that we have, this intersection of the private sector and the government. And so in order to address it, we have to address both sides of this coin, or else we really aren't going to be able to address government surveillance, because it's not really the government alone doing this surveillance. It is private companies that are working with the government to engage in the surveillance, or giving them this data, or making it available to the government so the government can readily access it and get it whenever they want it.
It's a very helpful overview. One of the things that I want to ask by way of follow-up, I think you've sort of talked a bit about this in the course of your response as well. Why has it proven so hard to dismantle the third-party doctrine? This is something, when I worked in government as a part of a privacy oversight agency, became painfully acquainted with the persistence of the third-party doctrine. You say a little bit more in your view about why it's proven so hard to undo in ways that seem commonsensical?
Well, I guess we expect common sense from the Supreme Court and good jurisprudence. Well, I think we've learned not to expect that from the Supreme Court. It seems designed to produce exactly the opposite. The third-party doctrine cases were created in the 1970s, long before we've had this the kind of modern digital revolution, and so they were short-sighted. But the doctrine stayed around because the Supreme Court was typically very afraid to decide anything involving technology. The court's view has often been, and you see these lines in the opinions, like, we need to be cautious and wait because technology is new and changing and we have to wait until we can really understand it. Well, if that's the case, well, then you're going to be waiting forever because technology is always changing. It's always evolving. It's always moving fast. So if that's the argument, you never jump in until it's all over. I guess at the end of time, then you could say, well, wait till technology stops. So the court has been reluctant to jump into the fray. But it did about 10 years ago in a case called Carpenter, cut back on the third-party doctrine. But instead of cutting the third-party doctrine out entirely, just overruling it, the court did what it typically does, which is it kind of goes in a kind of very wimpy, vague, uncommitted way. So it kind of said, well, with GPS surveillance, we think that the third-party doctrine shouldn't apply. But we don't want to say anything more. We don't want to get rid of the doctrine. We don't want to go beyond this one context, and we'll just stop there. And then they just left it. And they haven't addressed this, or really, they've been barely taken any Fourth Amendment cases since then, because I think they're afraid to jump into the area. In a way, part of me thinks, well, they should, and then part of me also thinks, well, generally the law is better when the Supreme Court doesn't touch it. So maybe it's a good thing they don't do anything. So that's where we are. We are in a place where the Supreme Court has signaled, well, maybe there are some limits to the third-party doctrine. There's some doubts to it. And it's kind of then said, okay, we're just going to leave it up to other courts to figure this all out based on what we've said. This, I think, and this is what I wrote in my paper on privacy in authoritarian times. This really, courts can take different approaches to this. And I was encouraging courts to say, just because the Supreme Court hasn't taken Carpenter to its logical conclusion, which really is that the third-party doctrine should be overruled. Because the court hasn't kind of gone down the rabbit hole and it's artificially stopped, doesn't mean that you have to stop. At the end of the day, courts can decide cases more boldly and can push more broadly and expand some of the ideas that were in Carpenter and stop a lot more government surveillance or at least require Fourth Amendment protections. Unfortunately, there are a lot of courts that will really only go so far as where Carpenter left off, and they won't go further. There are a number of end runs around Carpenter, such as when companies are selling the very same kind of data that was involved in Carpenter, and courts are saying, oh, okay, that's okay because it's not exactly gathering it in the same way they got it in Carpenter, and therefore, now I think that courts should take this as an invitation to be more expansive. Supreme Court wants to be weak. Courts can say, look, we're going to take it and we're going to push it further. And if the Supreme Court wants to rein us in, then let them take a case. Put it on them to kind of step in to pull back on it. But why not go boldly and see what the court does? And I always think the best thing to do is, decide it boldly and decide it right, and then let the court do what it's going to do. But don't try to play the Supreme Court's game of tiptoeing and barely doing anything. I think that's not the best approach for courts to do in light of this. So we really would make some progress if lower courts were to really seize the day and say, look, we're going to really develop really powerful law here. We can take and interpret Carpenter boldly and broadly and push further, and we should do that. And then put it on the Supreme Court to come back and tell us to stop. And most likely the court won't. The court's been very reluctant to go here again. I don't think it wants to.
So go boldly indeed as a call to action. And the question I want to ask you is maybe taking a step back, a bit more of a societal level, a conceptual level of why courts and other actors are not going as boldly as they should on privacy. There are several myths in your book that you dispel, and I want to get to that in a minute, but I want to start with something a little bit more foundational, where you start on privacy and technology, which is by saying, what is the right conception of privacy in the first place, right? I think most folks here are broadly convinced of the importance of privacy. They get why it's important to democratic health and vitality, but not everybody who's sympathetic to privacy necessarily thinks of it in terms that are more than rules and rights-based protections for individuals. But what you say in the book, I think what many of us in the field feel strongly about, is that privacy's got to be conceptualized in a more capacious way. It's got to be seen not just as a source of individual protections, but also as a rich social value with a number of other positive benefits. Can you say a little bit more about that? What's the right conception of privacy, power, and democracy?
Yeah, I think you've captured a lot of my view on this very well, which is I think privacy has suffered from overly narrow conceptions by policymakers and courts, views about privacy that have really limited the law's ability to address it. So some views are, well, there's no privacy in public because privacy has to be about concealing things. But there are a lot of dimensions of privacy that aren't about concealing things. There are a lot of privacy harms in public surveillance and in things that are not totally hidden away. There are many other notions about privacy and very narrow, crabbed views about privacy that really limit the ability to address it. Views about also privacy harm that minimize the harm of privacy, that see privacy as solely something as an individual interest. And so it kind of neglects the larger social effects of privacy, that privacy violations are not protected just to protect individuals, but they're also there to protect society. and that when privacy is balanced against other interests, it's often balanced as an individual right versus other interests that are balanced as a social right. And consider speech, which is a great example, I think, of this. That when we have a case with privacy versus free speech, when you look at free speech, the law doesn't look at free speech as just the speech of the particular individual. It looks at free speech generally and the value of free speech to society. Because you can take any free speech case, and in most cases, the speech of the one person really doesn't matter that much. So the famous case where Cohen wore a jacket, and the jacket said, "Fuck the draft," and the court says, "Look, you can't, stop him from wearing that jacket." Now, is one person wearing like a shirt or a jacket with a slogan, is it that important if we just view it as that one person? No, but the court looked at a larger principle that, it's very important for free speech that, the way that people choose to speak isn't censored, and that's good for society. Now, when it comes to privacy, it's, what's the value of privacy to this particular individual? And it's all individualistic. And that's the problem, that an individualistic conception of privacy is never going to stand up to these broader social concerns of free speech for all of society, security for all of society. We need efficient, good, productive commerce for all of society. And if it's weighed in this way, it's going to lose in the balance. So we need to understand privacy in a broad way so that it can be appropriately balanced against these other considerations.
So let's start moving a little closer to the prescriptions you set out, but by way of dispelling one of the myths, because one of the vague social values to which privacy is often opposed and then often loses is innovation, right? And it's not to say that innovation isn't important, but to be important to be precise about what it is and then how to compare innovation as a social value with privacy as a social value. Also to recognize, as some of your colleagues in academia have argued, privacy unlocks innovation in ways too. But one of the things you talk about, there are a handful of myths that you debunk in the book, which I highly recommend reading. One of those is law simply can't keep pace with technological advancements, and that explains the failure to regulate. You say no, not so. What's your take on why that is actually happening? Why the law has failed to keep pace?
Yeah, so it's sort of very much related to a bunch of these myths kind of feed on each other. And the one myth that you mentioned first was the innovation that we hear constantly. Regulation stifles innovation. That if we have regulation, we just can't innovate anymore. And we just see this again just the other day with Trump coming out and saying, well, we can't have good regulation of AI because it's going to stop AI innovation. I actually think that most of the regulation we have for AI and privacy is very weak and does very little to actually stop companies from doing business exactly the way they do business before. They just have a few more costs, but actually has a very small impact actually on the business. Despite what businesses say, they have a tantrum anytime you want to regulate them. It's like trying to give a cat a bath. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't change how they do business. We have all the big tech companies. Oh my gosh, we can't do business in the EU because of the GDPR. It's going to stop us. We can't do business in the EU. Guess what? They're all doing business in the EU. They're all doing just fine. They're making money hand over fist. They just find it annoying. And you look at the budgets. They maybe up their spend on privacy just a tad, but not that much actually. It's very underfunded. You look at how much they're spending versus the profit they're making. And it's actually a very, very, very tiny amount. So does it really affect them that much? No. But the idea that regulation stifles innovation, I think, is false. And we can look at, why are all the tech companies in California? They shouldn't be in California, right? They should be in states that don't have any privacy laws. California has the most privacy laws and the strictest privacy laws in the country. They should be fleeing from California, but they're not. And that's because the innovation has nothing to do with the regulation. It really has to do with other factors. All the things that I think the government is doing now, such as stifling immigration, hurting the universities, which come up with the ideas, and all the technologies are developed today really come from ideas that develop in the university system. Science and investment in science, all of the things that actually are the things that have made us innovative in the United States are being attacked. Regulation is not one of them. And it's very rare regulation is really doing that. And the other myth that is related is, well, we can't really regulate technology because it moves too fast. And policymakers don't have technological expertise, and technology is moving too fast for the law to keep up, and therefore we should just give up. And I think this is an argument that is wrong on so many levels. It's wrong because the regulation is not really saying we're going to completely rework your technologies. It's saying that there are certain fundamental values in society that we want to achieve. And ultimately, it's trying to steer technology to addressing those issues. If you want, companies respond to incentives. And that is, I think, just a basic economic truth. Companies respond to incentives. If the law incentivizes a company to do something, it does it. If the law incentivizes a company to do something else, it does it. Right now, what the tech companies want is the law to essentially do nothing and incentivize just profit. Just let them do whatever the hell they want. If the law says, no, we want safer cars, guess what? And the law mandates safer cars, guess what? Companies make safer cars. If the law mandates that cars are more fuel efficient, they are. And the thing that kind of makes me laugh is that if you ask a tech company, I have a problem. Can you solve my problem for me? Without even hearing what the problem is, they're like, of course, we can do anything, right? We are all powerful. AI is the solution to every problem. Even problems you don't even know you have, right? You can't even go online without like some AI assistant. Someone's like shoving AI in my face, literally throwing it in my face. Like, solution to all your life problems is AI. It's the answer to everything. And then you'd say, okay, here's the problem. How about can you comply with reasonable regulation? Oh my God, no, we can't do it. It's impossible. The law it won't work. Can't possibly make AI safer. Can't possibly address privacy issues. Of course you can. So you don't want to. And so that's the problem. And so I think if you rethink this, get rid of these myths. The law is basically just telling companies, look, we're going to incentivize you to do something that's safer, that's more privacy protective, that doesn't harm society and harm people. And that's what we're doing. And we're going to steer how you innovate in this direction. It's not stopping innovation, it's just changing what you innovate for. And so yes, the tech bros are going to be pissed off because they want to do what they want to do. And we're telling them, actually, no, there are other people in this world, and there are other interests in the world beyond what you want to do. And we think when you innovate, you should go in this other direction. And we're going to incentivize that with the law. I think that's totally reasonable. And I think that it does not stifle innovation. And I think it also does not impede technological development. We're still developing technologies. The airbag is technology. A seatbelt is technology. Safer cars are technology. Safer technologies are technology. All of them are innovation. It's just an innovation for a different value or different goal.
It's well said. We talk quite a bit, at least at OTI, about the need to reframe regulation not just as some sort of restraint or a set of shackles on players driving innovation, but also, I like your phrase, to steer innovation in the direction you want. and that regulation can do more than just constrain actors. It can unlock others, and it can also advance some sort of pro-social vision for privacy, for data use. So, which takes me to wanting to ask you to say a bit more about how privacy law should evolve, in your view, particularly in the United States, to maximize these social benefits we've been talking about and to maximize the protective impact. And since you started sort of going down the AI track, we can never escape. If it strikes you as relevant, can you say a little bit about how some of those recommendations respond to the fast evolving fears we have about both the commercial and governmental use of AI, how that turbocharges some privacy concerns? Where should we go, Dan?
Yeah, it's quite a question. I'll try to be brief about it, but I could go on for hours on this topic. I think where privacy law has gone astray, where it's kind of gone off the rails and have made a mistake, is it's sort of a well-meaning impulse, but the fact that so much personal information is being collected and used about us makes us very vulnerable. It makes us powerless. And so the law's impulse was, well, we need to give people control back. We need to give people control of their information. Unfortunately, this doesn't work. It puts the onus on people who just are not able to do this. And they're not able, some because they don't fully understand what's going on, but I don't think it's even possible for experts to fully understand what's going on. It doesn't scale. And this problem is really exacerbated by AI. It's just not possible for an individual to self-manage their privacy. And that's what the laws do. They say, well, here, we'll give you rights. Now, here's how we protect your privacy. You can get information about what data is being collected about you. You can access your data. You can correct your data. You can delete your data. And here we'll give you a couple of rights to opt out of a couple things, but maybe not everything, a few things. That's what we'll do to protect you. And then it's up to you. And then if you don't do these things, it's your fault, consumer. You're not doing enough. You don't care about your privacy because you didn't ask 1,000 companies to access your records. You didn't correct all these things. You didn't make thousands of data deletion requests. We'll put all the onus on people. And the problem is that people aren't equipped to make these decisions. First of all, it doesn't scale. They don't have time. There's just too many companies with the data. You don't even know most of the companies that have your data. So how are you supposed to do this? Even if you know a lot about privacy, I think I studied privacy for a long time. I know a lot about privacy. What I know is how much I don't know. So when I look at a privacy notice, it says nothing valuable to me. Nothing. Might as well it's junk. What I want to know is, okay, who are the vendors that have the data? What do your vendor agreements look like? What are you doing? How good is your privacy training? What does your privacy impact assessment look like? I'd like to have a long conversation with the privacy officer to really understand the quality of the privacy program at a company. And that's going to take a long time to really assess how good it is. And then security. I'll also have to do the same. Reasonable security. What's that? I want to know what kind of encryption you use. And do you have good training? And do you do penetration testing? And I could go on with 1,000 different things that I kind of need to know. Because ultimately what a person wants to know when they decide to use a technology, when they decide to share personal data, is a risk calculation, right? What are the benefits? And how could it harm me? How is it going to be harmful? And the problem is we really can't make that determination. Put information on your Facebook profile. What are the benefits? Yeah, I get to share information with other people. What are the potential harms? Depends, right? You don't know enough to make that calculation. And when you share information these days with AI, you decide, okay, yeah, I'm only going to share information about my purchases. So what? That a company knows what I bought at the store. I'm just buying, a bunch of little items. Who cares? Well, now the algorithms can take that data and can analyze the data and can figure out all sorts of other information about you that you never expected to be revealed. Case in point was the very famous Target anecdote many years ago. And this is many years ago. Now it's much more sophisticated. But they developed an algorithm to determine early on in a pregnancy, who was pregnant? And they analyzed people's purchases. This is before they even started buying baby products. So they analyzed non-baby product purchases to figure out if they were pregnant. And ultimately, their algorithm was pretty good. And the famous anecdote in the story was that a father of a teenage girl went to the store and complained, saying, "Why are we getting all these baby ads in the mail?" And it turns out his daughter was pregnant and hadn't told him yet. The data that was used turns out that some of the main factors in this algorithm were buying cotton balls and buying unscented products. But what the larger lesson that we can learn from the story is that anything that you buy or do, any little piece of data, no matter how innocuous, you'll never know when it's combined with other data what it's going to reveal about you. And it's a changing landscape in terms of the implications of the revelation of that data or the use of that data. So now, data about pregnancy is being used to determine, in states that have prohibited abortion, that want to investigate people, this could be an issue of whether or not someone's criminally prosecuted. So the whole equation, how is someone to decide the risk or know that, wow, they could actually end up, being in jail for buying cotton balls at Target? That's the implication. And so many things we buy now, everything is politicized. I can't even buy a damn pillow without having it politics. Every product has politics these days. So this is the implication. It's going to reveal things about your health. It's going to reveal things about political beliefs, religion, everything. And we really can't, a consumer can't manage this, because how do they know what the algorithms are going to come up with and what data is going to be revealed and what the future is going to hold and how it's going to be potentially used? It's just not manageable. The privacy law can't work this way. It will not provide adequate protection. It's just another way to throw it onto individuals and then blame the victims.
So if what I'm hearing, and certainly what the book argues in quite a compelling way, is that this both privacy self-help at the individual level is meaningless and impossible, kind of in the face of surveillance capitalism, in the face of these business models, in the face of inferences. But what are the? I kind of want you to ask. I want to ask you to rate at a high level some of the features you've seen in recent federal privacy proposals, legislative proposals like ADPPA and like APRA. Some of those elements include data minimization, saying collect only what you need, company XYZ, in order to do the purpose that you define. And there are some other structural features. Some of them are focused on consumer rights and consumer choice, which have the limitations you outlined. Structural features like data minimization and others that you find in proposals that are federal, and then we'll come to the states and your prescription for the states in a minute, and then open it up to Q&A. But which of these elements of proposed laws have promise, in your view, and which are missing in terms of tackling the structural problems you described?
Yeah, so I think that, I like data minimization provisions, but the devil's in the details. A lot of these things, the devil's in the details. I like some of them. I'm not against individual rights. I think they should be part of laws, but I think you can't just rely solely on them. A lot of the problems with the federal laws was that wasn't that like particular things in them were bad, they were incomplete. The things I really hated about them was they preempted state law, which is very bad, just given that the federal government is awful about keeping its laws up to date. Congress Congress really can't do anything, but it doesn't update laws. ECPA, the law that regulates electronic surveillance by the government and by private parties, is nearing like 40 years old at this point. It's ancient, and everyone's calling for it to be updated. It's not updated. The law regulating privacy in schools, FERPA, is 50 years old. It's an awful law. The other problem with the laws is that they're tied to how they're enforced. You can have a law and it says all the right things, but if it's badly enforced, it's junk. It doesn't do anything. And today, so like in the laws, we're like, okay, yeah, we're going to do all this stuff. We're going to take power away from the states to do much, and then we're going to give it to the FTC. But if you don't say we're going to give the FTC more budget to do it, okay, yeah, it's just, the FTC is not going to do much more. It already has Section 5 enforcement for the FTC. So now you're going to shift enforcement to this new federal law without much more money or any more resources. It's not clear you're actually going to change the enforcement equation. You're just shifting it to a law that now makes the FTC less likely to try new things or do something beyond the law or evolve, where Section 5 is a much more fluid, broader standard that you can evolve. And now we look at the FTC today when the Democratic commissioners got fired, and it seems like the only thing the FTC is doing is now enforcing Made in the USA. And who knows what else, but it's kind of become a bit of a joke. Now that's going to be our enforcer for privacy. So you have to look at enforcement. I'm a big fan of a private right of action. I think that a robust private right of action is very important in addition to agency enforcement because it drives enforcement. There were private rights of action in these federal proposals, but we also have courts that are incredibly reluctant to recognize privacy harms. And so a lot of these cases, even if you have a private right of action, it'll look very pretty in the law, but unless you do something to address the standing problems, a lot of courts would then just say, oh, there's no harm, and therefore there's no injury, and even though you have the private right of action, you can't get redress. Because the Supreme Court has said basically even being labeled a terrorist falsely in your credit reports is not a harm. Well, then what would be a harm? Yeah, Congress is like, yeah, we'll put a private right of action, good. Then just go to, when you actually go to try to use it, the door slams shut in your face. These are the problems. And so if you really want to address the law, you can kind of look at provisions and say, yeah, I like that, I like that, I like that. But you ultimately have to evaluate, how does the whole law going to work? How's the enforcement going to work? How are these pieces going to work together? How practically is this going to work on the ground? And that's the same thing with data minimization. I really like data minimization, but it all depends on how rigorously they're going to be enforced. Because it's easy to say, yes, use data that's proportionate to the uses that you're going to do. Keep it for as long as necessary, but no longer. You can have all this language, but then if it's not actually enforced, companies are just going to do whatever the hell they want. And then only the most egregious of egregious cases are going to be enforced. And so companies know, hey, as long as we just aren't horrifically, heinously, awfully bad, we're okay. And that's what happens in a lot of cases. And so you really need a lot of enforcement to be rigorous, to push on the gray areas, not just the outrageous cases, which they often do, but they don't have the resources to do that. And so, yeah, you have the law in the books, and it can look pretty, it can look nice, it can say all the right things, it can sound nice, but unless you have these other practical components in the law, it's not really going to move the needle.
I think many of the points you addressed in that answer speak both to unresolved issues and reasons that federal privacy legislation. There are many reasons federal privacy legislation hasn't got over the line in a comprehensive or credible form in terms of consumer privacy law. Preemption and private right of action are places where political compromise founders, there's paralysis. Those are some of the reasons hasn't happened at the federal level. And at the state level, I think many things you're describing, experimentation with stronger substantive standards that address the structural issues and don't only use the toggle of individual rights, stronger enforcement and a will to enforce as well, are things that states have experimented with to varying degrees. Beyond what you said, are there a couple other things that you want to highlight? Your article, Privacy in Authoritarian Times, has a detailed set of prescriptions for legislatures and for courts, particularly at the state level, for trying to address authoritarian challenges, right? The government threats to privacy and then sort of willful government desire to erode privacy further to advance authoritarian aims. So in that, with that lens in particular, are there additional things you'd want to emphasize about your recommendations for state level action when federal action is not around the corner?
Yeah, the paper made a number of recommendations for how states could really step it up. I think that, while it's nice that the states, about 20 states have passed privacy laws, they're very weak. They're pretty bad. If I had to grade most of them, they get Ds and Fs. They're using approaches that have long been discredited. They are, fairly, they omit a lot of things. I think they are generally pretty weak, and none of them have a private right of action. I mean, there's a limited private right of action in California, but it's limited. They fail on many levels. That said, I'm not a big fan of, I don't like preemption. I like the fact that states could, if they wanted to, pass laws. And every now and then they pass a decent law, the Illinois Biometric Information Privacy Act, which is about 15-year-old law. That's actually a pretty tough, powerful law, because the courts there actually, don't shut out people based on bogus claims that there's no harm for violations, and we have a law that's has a private right of action that's pretty rigorously enforced, and so it works better. So I'd love to see more from the states in this regard. What we've seen, though, I think, so far, in response to what the administration's doing from the states is very little. Unfortunately, we have not seen a very good response. I'm hoping that some states will really say this is the opportunity now to really step it up, to really see the value. And that was the message in the paper, which I think has fallen on deaf ears. Is like for states that are so inclined, states that are want to rebuff the administration, privacy is a great thing to use to fight back. Strengthen your laws. Make your laws better. Unfortunately, I haven't seen a lot of that happening yet. Hopefully it will at some point, because I do think it does make a difference. But I'm waiting for the states to address these problems. I think generally the states have not really addressed a lot of the problems that we're seeing at the federal government. Just as a general matter, I think at this point, the state should get the lesson. Like, the federal government is a sinking ship. It is bad, and it is doing active harm. Things that the government we've kind of expected the government to do are being dismantled and are not going to be done, and probably won't be done in generations. So if we want it done, the states have to step it up and do it themselves. You want to protect the environment, the states have to jump in and try to do these things. You want to protect privacy, stop looking to the federal government. The federal government is not going to help you. It is a sinking ship, a burning building. It's you have to do it if they want, and the states can lead the way. Large, powerful states like California and Massachusetts and New York and Illinois and others can lead the way. They pass powerful laws. They can have a big influence, but they need to step it up and do things if we really want to preserve these functions. But just sort of hoping that somehow magically the federal government is going to turn around or suddenly get repaired, once the Trump administration's over. I just think that's not going to happen. So it's time the states really step in and say, we've got to lead. It's time for us to lead. But that's not going to happen if you have very weak laws that are basically cut and paste jobs from other weak laws. You really do need to start legislating in a aggressive, creative, forward-looking way. And I'm not seeing that in privacy. I'm not seeing that in many other issues as well. And it's interesting that we haven't really seen many new state privacy laws this year. They were being passed, quite a number of them in the previous years. We're not seeing them. Now, it is true that some states are passing amendments to strengthen their laws a little bit, which is good. But it's not happening fast enough or boldly enough for the moment. And that's the thing. I think like what we've seen now is we're in a moment where it's kind of crying out for a pretty dramatic response. And we're not really getting that response. The response is not matching the level of danger and problems that we're in.
And it's a sobering prescription, but also an impassioned call to action. I want to make sure that we can get some folks in the room here with questions time as well. We have some online that you've addressed in part. Let me start in the room. I see Nii here in the front, and I'll go to you in the back just after that. Thanks, Eleanor, for the help with the mic. And when you, just before you ask your question, please endeavor to keep it brief, but just your name and your affiliation, if you will, please. Be great.
Good morning. My name is Nii Simmons. I'm a visiting fellow at New America, the Digital Futures and Planetary Politics group. Daniel, I haven't read your book. Sounds very interesting. Glad it's only short, 100 pages. I'll take a look at it while I'm on travel next week. A couple questions. If you were king for a day, how would you coalesce a fractional group of people, Democrats, Republicans, into one room and say, hey, we're going to come together, we're going to figure this out, and nobody's leaving, kind of like what JP Morgan did during the financial crisis, during the Great Depression, right? For those who don't know, JP Morgan forced people in the room, locked the door, and say, we're going to figure this out. Maybe not that dramatic, but if you were king for a day, what would you do for that instance? Number two, what's your take on the I wouldn't say AI law, but the I don't know, is it a bill or executive order with that announcement yesterday? What's your concerns or what's your thoughts on that, on privacy, right? Because they're trying to unshackle AI, and it seems China is all over. Everybody's thinking about China, right? So that's the second question. Thank you.
Yeah, so king for a day. How can I unite the country? I'm not sure we can be united really at this point. I'm increasingly of the view that maybe the country kind of needs a divorce. I think that there's just some fundamental values and things that we can't even agree if we should be a democracy. I think at this point, it's hard to kind of be in the same country. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to unite on a lot of issues. On privacy, actually, I think it used to be more of a bipartisan issue. And it used to be something that, there was, a chance to find some consensus on. I think, it's unlikely that we're going to find cooperation and consensus, even if it's hard to mandate that people think differently. I think, unfortunately, now it's that the parties just the other party's doing it, we don't want to do it. It's literally like they don't want to get along, and I'm not sure that's really going to change. So I think that ultimately, we need to forge ahead. The New Deal times were, in a way, you have to hit rock bottom to really rebuild. And I think that, my view when I look at the future of the country is that probably the best thing for us is we have to hit rock bottom. It's got to get absolutely horribly awful if this country is going to have a chance. I wish it were a different way, that somehow we're just somehow in this weird funk and we'll just come out of it. Unfortunately, I think we have to hit like rock bottom, and it's got to be awful. Maybe like the Great Depression. And then maybe out of those ashes, that something good will happen. But I don't think this is going to be a kind of soft landing or just pull the plane up from its course downward. I think it's going to have to be a crash to have any meaningful change. Yeah, and that was averted. I mean, that was bad, but it wasn't the Great Depression. I think what we need is not just a complete and utter collapse and then, rebuild out of smoldering ashes. I don't see what happened in 2008, kind of like turning around. We kind of turned it around. I wish it would be the case, but I just don't think that's going to be what happens. I think that the other question, the AI question, I mean, everything that the administration puts out is, I mean, they're words that are meaningless, right? It changes on a dime. It changes on whatever impulse that the administration has at the moment. So, yeah, it says whatever, but that doesn't mean anything to me. Obviously, there's a deregulatory winds that are pushing, especially with AI. I think it's kind of strikes me as humorous because no one even knows what AI is. No one really can even define AI. So it's like, deregulate AI. Well, what the hell is AI? I don't know. It sounds good. I like the term. Everyone talks about it. So let's deregulate it. AI is everything. I think, when we talk about AI as if it's kind of somehow like this special new thing, it's not. It's old technologies that are like 50 to 70 years old. It's basically algorithms. These days, like any company, like, if you have an algorithm, just say it's AI now. Just rebrand it. AI is just an elaborate rebrand. But it's actually not artificial and it's not intelligent. So it has nothing to do with what we used to think of AI being, which is somehow some kind of sentient robot. It's not. AI is really an extension of things that have been going on for years and years, just with different terms. We used to use the term data mining or big data, data analytics, algorithms, inference, and so on. I mean, I wrote about this for 25 years. I've talked about the same issues for a long time. But now, I have to use the term AI to talk about them because no one will read it if I don't use the term AI. So it's all about AI. The problem is, like, how do AI is everything. So, it reminds me of the early days of talking about internet law, cyber law. The cyber law is going to be its own thing. The internet's going to be its own little world. Don't regulate it. It's the special space, the John Perry Barlow manifesto, all that crap. And we never realized, like, everything's the internet, right? It's every field is the internet. There isn't like some special like internet law. It's everything. And I think AI is going to be the same thing because it's involved with everything. And ultimately there isn't going to be like this one omnibus AI law, this way we can, it's basically, so saying we're not going to regulate AI means basically we're not going to regulate anything. We're going to do it with all regulation. Because AI is going to be in cars, it's going to be in health devices, it's going to involve privacy, it's going to involve safety, it's going to involve jobs, it's going to involve IP, it's going to involve so many different things, it's going to involve everything. And ultimately, we have laws that address these areas. If you look at internet law, tort law, contract law, other things have absorbed the internet issues. Not always well, often poorly, because law often absorbs things poorly, but it has absorbed it, it has dealt with it. And these different laws have tried to address the issues that the internet has raised. And I think the same thing is going to happen with AI. The privacy issues of AI are going to be dealt with primarily by privacy law. The safety issues with cars are going to be dealt with safety for cars. I'd rather have people who know about those issues, address the issues of AI, because AI is everything. And so I think to me, it sounds very silly, naive, and uninformed to kind of say, oh, well, we just won't regulate AI or to speak of AI this way, because I think they just, people don't know what they're talking about. It's nonsensical.
I think we have a couple more questions here and in the back. Yes, if we can get a mic over there, and then I believe Emily had a question. We're pushing up against a time limit. If you have a few more minutes, Dan, I know there's some questions. We can continue for a little bit.
My name is Roger Cochetti. I am an author and a writer, mostly on history of technology. And I'd like to thank you for highlighting the third-party doctrine because it is the elephant in the privacy room. But I wonder if you could respond to some of the comments I've heard constitutional originalists make about both topics, the collection of information and then the providing it to government agencies. On the first topic of collecting information. What I've heard originalists say is that James Madison would recognize the issue perfectly. John Doe goes into the same bar every day. The barkeep recognizes John Doe and remembers what John Doe likes to drink. And one day he says, John, you're wearing a different shirt today, because every day he's wearing a green shirt and then he wears a blue shirt. So the collection of information by the private sector has been around for a long time. It simply hasn't been mechanical. So if you're going to outlaw the robot machine doing it, should you also outlaw humans remembering who the customer is or what they're doing? On the constitutional issue, the third-party doctrine issue, what they said is that the third-party doctrine has been around forever. We would call it paid informants. A government agent, called a policeman, goes to somebody and says, can you get me some information on this criminal or suspected criminal, and we'll pay you for that information. So they're paid informants, the argument goes, would have been recognized by James Madison. Their conclusion, which I'd love to hear you respond to, is that if you want to change the Constitution, change the Constitution, but we've had paid informants since the Constitution was written, and we've had barkeeps who remembers what people are doing in the bar since the Constitution. So how do you respond to the arguments from the other side? Thank you.
Yeah, well, you raised a lot of good questions, and I mean, I'm generally not a fan of originalism, because I think it's basically bad history selectively applied to justify whatever certain justices want to do by people with no training in history. I think the Constitution is kind of in need of a rewrite. I mean, it's shocking we still have clung to this Constitution for this long. I think even the framers of the Constitution, if they woke up and they saw, like, what are you, seriously, you're still using this thing? It had a shelf life of like 20 years. I think, but I don't think anyone today, I don't think the politicians today are up to writing a new constitution. I don't want them to write it. That's the problem. If I can just revive the framers again. But on the Fourth Amendment, I actually do think the original history is very clear about something that was not in the stuff that you talked about. And that is, I think, the single thing that they hated, and I think it's beyond dispute, is they hated dragnet searches. They detested dragnet searches. These are people who fought a revolution against an oppressive government that was trying to figure out, what people were writing, and were people criticizing the government. That's what they wanted, or not following, their oppressive laws. And they didn't want that government to be able to go and do broad-based dragnet searches, go through and rifle through all their papers, because that's what they had then. They had papers. So what they really didn't like was when the government could barge into your home and say, we have a general warrant, we're investigating a libel. We don't know who did it. It's an anonymous person. We're going to search everyone's house, look through their papers to see if they wrote that. We don't want that. And the Fourth Amendment is crystal clear in everything it says, in everything they said. We hate dragnet searches. No dragnet searches. And what we see now is a total end run around that. Most of the gathering of data from third parties is basically a dragnet search. It's getting a lot of information. Because today we don't have physical papers, we have data that is in the hands of third parties. And the government's getting all this data from data brokers, which is essentially doing dragnet searches, which the framers didn't want. So I don't think they're going to see these people as, it's just an individual operating as an informant. This is, and by the way, if there was somebody during their time, for the framers, who was acting as an informant for the British, guess what would happen to them? They'd be killed. They'd be a spy. They'd be executed, right? These are revolutionaries. I I don't think they were fond of informants for the government when they're actually fighting the government. That's, if we really want to get their original intent, that's their intent. They're very skeptical of oppressive government. And so they want to make sure that people are protected, that people can say what they want to say, criticize the government, be revolutionaries if they want, and be protected. And the problem with the use of this data is it's done, it can be used without the protections of the Fourth Amendment. Because basically the whole idea of the Fourth Amendment is, look, we don't want to bar the government from gathering information. We just want to make sure that the government has a basis, a reasonable basis to believe that it's connected to a crime. And then we want to make sure that they get a authorization that's limited, that's circumscribed, that's overseen by a court, so that there's some protection, that it's not this broad-based search, but it's a more narrow search. And that's what we want. And the Fourth Amendment isn't saying you can't investigate crime, you can't get information. It's just saying, look, when you do it, we have these protections to follow. The problem with third-party doctrine is it's an end run around that protection. It basically means that you don't have any requirement to be narrow in your search. You don't have any requirement to go to a court for your search. You have no requirements at all. You can just do whatever you want without any oversight or accountability whatsoever. And so I think if the framers saw this and saw the massive data gathering and analytics that are going on today, I think they would totally freak out and they would say, what the hell is wrong with you guys?
I want to see, Emily, I know you had a question. I want to let me just try to layer one last one from online. And I think we need to unfortunately conclude at that point. We could do this for much longer. This question is almost a plea. With techno-capitalism and with no intent from the government, I'm lacking hope for what corporations and governments are going to do. What are your recommendations? And I know we talked about the perils of privacy self-help, but I think this is a heartfelt plea. Recommendations on how we, the people, can take agency and educate in response.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Make me king, and then I'll fix it all, right? At this point, just elect someone president, and they're king, right? But I think that we really do need to, I hope, take new directions in policymaking. And this is not going to be a kind of like easy fix or a silver bullet. I hope that states can step it up. I think there's only some limited things individuals can do. I mean, so the law, individuals protect your privacy a little bit more, exercise more of your privacy rights. None of that is really helpful. Really, what individuals need to do is say to policymakers that will listen, which is policymakers at the state level, hey, we want better laws. The laws you're giving us are not adequate for the job. We want to be protected. We don't like the direction that this country is going in. We want you to fight back. We want you to pass laws that are really going to be effective, that are really going to rein in surveillance capitalism, that are really going to regulate effectively. And there are ideas out there. You just need to actually do them. We won't accept the crap that you're serving us. We want something better. And I think that would start to hopefully move the needle. And if some legislatures start doing it, hopefully we'll see more copying what they're doing. Because that's one thing is, once a few states do something, a lot of them then will also start to do something. So it's great that Maryland passed the data minimization approach to privacy, and now other states are thinking about it. I think when we see a state or two that passes a private right of action and a privacy law, hopefully other states will jump in and say, hey, the world didn't end by having this, we'll do it too. And hopefully that would start to move the needle a little bit, but it's not going to be easy. It really is going to be, people demanding that there be a better response, because I don't think we've seen that response yet. We've seen a lot of outrage over all the things going on at the federal government. We've seen a lot of push on, we wish, the the policymakers at the federal level, the Democrats in Congress should do something. It's not clear they have the power to. They can do more, certainly. It'd be great to see them fight more, but they can only do so much. But there's a lot more that the states can jump in and do more, and they should. And privacy is an area where they really can start to do more. But the way to stop the government from getting all the data that it wants, well, you got to make companies not have that data. And if the companies don't have the data, the government can't get it from them. That's just one way. And if you have requirements, if California were to say, look, we're going to make requirements on surveillance technologies, on data analytics technologies, build in accountability mechanisms, build in protections, we're going to require certain design things of the technologies, well, then companies now know they can't make the technologies that don't have those things. They have to build them in. And most likely, if you have enough big states requiring that, you're going to have the companies are not going to build like different versions. They're going to build one version. They're going to typically build the version based on the specifications of the bigger states where there's a bigger market share. And if they start doing that, then we'll have better technologies, which will hopefully have better controls and provisions that will be more protective of privacy. But I think it's really going to be at the state level that we're likely practically to see those changes. And I just, hopefully that there'll be some states that will lead the way to say, hey, we can try this law, put it out there, and if it works well, hopefully other states will say, yeah, let's do that too.
Well, Dan, that actually anticipated another question, which you've now answered from online. And so I just want to say thanks for your prescriptions and for the passion. If you want more of that combination, highly recommend On Privacy and Technology by Dan Solove, an accessible and rich read. Thank you on behalf of New America and OTI for spending your time with us this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.